stage at the Madison Square Garden. I couldn't believe that I just performed at one of the most incredible venues in the world. I was on tour with another artist, and that afternoon I was on my tour bus en route back to Nashville, Tennessee, and I was thinking about everything that I had accomplished that year. When I got to my house, I was standing in the foyer of my warm, comfortable home and stirring a cup of coffee, and I leaned over and I turned the heat up. This overwhelming feeling of guilt consumed me. Not only reminded me of everything that I had accomplished that year, going on this major tour, but it reminded me of the things that I hadn't done, the promise that I kept when I was a kid. If I ever make it, I'm not going to forget where I come from. If I ever make it, I'm going to give back. That's easier said than done when you make it. I called my manager. I said, I have an idea. I want to raise awareness for the foster youth who are aging out at 18 years old and becoming homeless. I think I'm going to walk halfway across the United States of America. 2 weeks later, I started out of Nashville, Tennessee, on foot, and I walked. I told them it wasn't going to take me but 3 months, but 3 days into this thing, I could still see my house. I'm like, oh, no. But I'm committed. I'm already on film. 3 months into this walk, I wasn't even at the halfway point. 7 months later, I walked into Phoenix, Arizona, on a broken foot. It's the most incredible journey of my life. I met wonderful people. If you think this world is bad, go for a walk and meet some of those folks that I met who would meet me at the end of their driveway holding a cup of coffee. Pray with me. It was awesome. That was the most incredible journey of my life, but it wasn't the hardest at all. The hardest journey for me was when I was a kid, growing up in the system. You see, my mom got out of prison when I was 12 years old, and she met a fellow, married him. I thought he was going to be a wonderful stepdad. He started out that way until one night he committed a crime, and he took me and my mother with him on this long run from the law. We slept in this car, this Olds Delta 88 Oldsmobile, and the clothes were stacked on the right side of the back seat, and it smelled bad. There was a little hole where I would sit for days and days and weeks, months and months into this thing, into this journey, stopping at rest areas. Mom would put clothes under her shirt pretending she was pregnant, collecting money for fuel. We headed west to Oklahoma from North Carolina. We headed south to Texas from Oklahoma. We headed back east to Pensacola, Florida. It was in the middle of the night, and my stepdad woke me up, and he told me to get out of the car. I didn't know what was going on, but I got out of the car. My mother was standing at the trunk, and she was crying. She couldn't even look at me. I remember looking at her in the nighttime, and she leaned over and she kissed me on the face, and she handed me my clothes. She got in a car, and they drove away, and they never come back. I was 13 years old, and at this point, I was just trying to figure out how to survive. And for the next 3 years of my life, I was in and out of the system. I lived on the street. I lived in strangers' homes, friends' homes, slept on couches. I'd walk into a convenience store and just ask the person behind the counter if I could have some food. I was so hungry. It was just 3 years of just suffering. And one day, I was going down the road on a bicycle that I had borrowed. I was going to return it. I didn't know when, but I was going to return it. I saw this gentleman standing in a wood shop. He was cutting dashers for butter churns. He was an elderly man in his mid-70s, 76 years old, and I went up to him. I said, "Sir, do you have any work I can do?" And he didn't even look at me. He kind of just nodded his head that way and said, "You need to ask the boss." And he pointed at his wife, a little white-haired lady, turned off the radio arm saw and wiped some sawdust off of her clothes and walked over to me and pulled her goggles up on top of her head, and she looked at me and she looked me up and down. She said, "If you cut grass, come back this afternoon and cut our grass." I did. I ended up being their lawn boy for the remainder of that summer. I was on time every week because I knew I needed that money. I needed that $20 that she paid me for food. Toward the end of the summer, she asked me, she said, "Jimmy, where do you live?" I didn't want to tell her where I lived because I felt like if I told her I was a homeless kid, or I'd grown up in the system, or I had tattoos, that she wouldn't want me around their house because maybe she'd think I was trouble and I might do something to them or take something from them. So I just said, "I live up the street from here." And she said, "Russell and I have been talking and want to know if you'd be interested in moving into our home." I've been there before. I grew up in the system where sometimes you would live with a family for 2 or 3 days, 2 weeks maybe, and they'd decide that they didn't want you. And they'd kick you out. They'd call your social worker to come get you at school. If you were real lucky, they'd leave your clothes on the steps. That happened. But I thought to myself, you know what, it's an opportunity to have a place to sleep tonight, a place to eat. Hopefully they'll let me wash my clothes. And man, I'll get to take a shower. Some things that a lot of us in this world take for granted. Okay, I showed up that afternoon with my plastic bag full of dirty clothes. I rang the doorbell, and Miss Costner, her name was Beatrice. She'd prefer you just call her B, the first 3 letters of the word beautiful. She showed up and she opened the door. She had this big smile. She says, "Come on in." I walked in. She showed me to my bedroom. It was a brand new room, brand new carpet, brand new bed, a table with a lamp and a clock. I couldn't believe there's no way in the world this is going to be mine. This is unbelievable. They're just going to make me leave. I didn't even unpack my clothes. I just put them in the corner. And sure enough, about 4 or 5 days after I was there, Mr. Costner passed me in the hallway. And he stopped me, put his hand on my shoulder, and he says, "I need to talk to you about something." I knew what he was going to say. Mr. Costner his name was Russell. He didn't say very much, but when he did, you didn't misunderstand it. He was a military gentleman, had fought World War II. He kept everything short and sweet. I always describe Russell as if you took Andy Griffith or Bill Cosby and you combine that with Clint Eastwood and the movie Gran Torino and combine those personalities. That was Russell. He was a really tough military guy on the outside, but on the inside he had a heart of gold. He sat me down in this chair and he stared at me from across the room. He stared at me a lot all the time, and he said, "Jimmy, if you're going to stay in my house, there's 2 things you've got to do." Now, I didn't correct him. The first thing is you've got to cut off all of your hair. We want you to go to church. And if you don't do those 2 things, you've got to leave now. I ended up staying with this family 6 years. This family single-handedly changed every single cell in my body. They gave me the opportunity to go to school, go back to high school, with the help of a lot of people. I went every day of high school. I didn't want to miss it. I was even there on senior skip day, the only one, looking around. They gave me a chance to go to college. I graduated with my degree in criminal justice because I knew a lot about it. They gave me a chance to pursue my dream. Not only to pursue it, but to catch it. During this walk, I had this idea. When I got back to Nashville, I shared it with my co-writer friend Pat Alger, and I said, "I wonder how Jesus felt when he was hanging on the cross." And I thought, you know what? He didn't feel like hating. He felt like forgiving. I was only 9 years old a newly converted soul, eager to understand the mystery of God's plan. I made across a rope and wood, spread out my arms across and stood, and like a living crucifix, all scrawny arms and legs and sticks, I wonder how Jesus felt up there as his mother knelt, watching as they drove the nails into his flesh and bone. It was midnight when he stopped in the Trailways parking lot. I was in the way it seemed, didn't fit into his crazy scheme. They drove away and left me there. Mom hoped I'd find my way somewhere, and as the taillights disappeared, I wiped away my teenage tears. I wonder how Mary felt, knowing that she could not help, watching as they drove the nails through his flesh and bone. A stray dog with my head hung down, I wandered every street in town. No one would look me in the eye, people only pass me by, until an angel took me in and showed me how to love again. Oh yeah, she looked upon me as her son. I was saved by the power of one. Now the one who stranded me is pleading for my empathy. All that she really needs is what she failed to guarantee. And like a ship who sails her toward, she'll never make it through the storm. Oh no, without the love and helping hand from the boy who grew into a man. Finding forgiveness for my sins and yours. Oh yeah, the gift of forgiveness, that's how we endure. I think I know how Jesus felt up there all by himself, watching as they drove the nails through his flesh and bone. With broken arms stretched out wide, on that bloody cross he died, to teach us all how to love even those who do us wrong. I think I know how Jesus felt Russell passed away, and I stayed there with Miss Costner and ended up moving out, obviously, and would always go back and pick her up because I knew that she needed someone there to help her through this time of her life. And she loved to go to those shows that I would do, the cookouts and the karaoke contest, and she'd always sit on the front row. She'd work a crossword puzzle, and then she'd read scripture. And she did that the entire show. On the way home that day from a show, something said, "You need to tell her how much you appreciate her and what she and Russell have done for you." And I was thinking to myself as I was driving, we're a minute and 20 seconds from her house. I'm not used to hearing those words. It's so hard for me to say them. I looked over at her and I said, "B, I love you." Well, that was tough, but when I said those words, it was like something happened. And it opened up a floodgate of thank you so much for everything. Thank you for this opportunity, this car, that I was allowed to buy, because you took me into your home. Thank you for these clothes. Thank you for everything. Thank you for that Coca-Cola and that donut you used to give me when I'd cut the grass. Thanks for everything. And as I'm driving to her driveway, I'm pulled into her driveway, and I got out of the car and I ran around and I locked my arms with her arm and helped her out of the car. And she's 83 years old at this time, and we're walking to the front door, that same glass door that she welcomed me into their home. And we stopped right there. And she turned around and looked at me. And I said, "B, I'll be back in a couple of days to take you to another event." And she responded to me by saying, she said, "Goodbye, Jimmy." And she waved, and then, of course, I waved at her. And then she waved again. And I waved again. And next thing you know, we're waving at each other. And this thing goes on for 5 minutes. And finally, I'm backing up and I'm saying, "I'll see you in 3 days." And she kept waving. And she waved all the way to the car. I got in the car and I'm looking through the rear view, and she's still waving like it's going out of style. I drove down the road. I could see her in the doorway, just receding. The next morning, I got up. I received a phone call very early. It was her daughter. She told me B had passed. I am so thankful for that opportunity to tell that person who helped me thanks, and I love them. Thank you.